Well, good afternoon. Well, it's a 1 minute to departure. Anything you want to learn from this, Mark?
Yeah. Well, so I think it's more of a fear thing, we're all afraid of what may happen um, with one of these situations. So it's good to be prepared, right? Failure to plan is planning to fail, kind of thing.
There you go. All right. So we are working on the whole webinar series. So our motto is 24 and 24 because we're going to do 24 webinars across the year. There are a variety of topics, and they're to try and help our commercial customers understand a few things that we find they are sometimes puzzled by, and perhaps help them think about some of the things that we're working on. So we'll take you through a few slides here and talk a little bit about resilience. And I don't know why people would want to plan a disaster, but apparently it's about planning the recovery. So for those of you who are Storm customers, we thank you, and we will be happy to make sure that you know that these webinars take place. Right now, we're doing them at lunchtime. We know there's a number of customers that have asked to be added to the list, so they automatically get this. So I'm working on that. And so thanks for spending an hour with us, or maybe a little less than an hour, depending on the Q&A, to chat about the implications of disaster recovery, business continuity, and specifically on. We look forward to your all of your different comments and questions. So this is our third one. We did our first one in an experiment. Was we actually went ahead and added a Wi-Fi so we could figure out what the process was for doing these as a team. And so we've been working on this as a team to get the webinars going. Our second one, we had a guest, Alan Pollitt. He's done 3,000 websites with his team for SEO, and he provided some information for people on SEO. This one's backup recovery, BCDR, and a bunch of other things. Our next one coming up on the 25th of January is going to be on wireless links. It won't just be point-to-point, it'll also be point-to-multipoint. And then working with Anne Vanderlyn, who's our Director of Customer Success, we'll get an opportunity to talk about notes from the NOC. So the NOC is the Network Operations Center, and we're looking for frequently asked questions that might show up. We're looking for things that make sense for us to talk to you about, so that you can be more resilient and see what's going on with that. And then, of course, we've also got more to come. We've got 17 of them outlined at this point. So this is only the third in the series. So and we will bring back the Wi-Fi and the SEO one in the next quarter. So for those of you who don't know us, we've been serving the Ottawa area for more than 25 years. We have 3 offices, Perth, Chesterville, Ottawa, and we're all about high-speed internet. We own our own what's called facilities-based distribution, in that we own 260 odd towers, and we also provide fiber in certain areas. So we do the VARS Business Park, otherwise known as the 417 Business Park, and we also provide it in the Clayton area. So, and that's an expanding footprint for mostly fiber to the home, but there are some customers there that do get their internet feed off our fiber that are actually commercial in that area. We're doing a lot of things with fixed wireless access these days, partly for failover even. So you can actually, you never have to fear a backhoe if you have a wireless link, because a backhoe can't break it, but it certainly can. Even somebody digging in the garden can break a fiber. So we'll talk a little bit about that along the way as part of the ways to making ourselves more resilient. We do third-party internet access. So there's, in Canada, we have this ability to resell facilities that come from the larger players. So the biggest three are Bell, Rogers, and TELUS. And so we have the ability to sell their DSL, their cable, and their fiber. And we resell those, and then we add things like access points and cameras and other things that people want integrated in. Our customer service is located in various areas across the Ottawa Valley. We serve more than 10,000 customers, both in residential and commercial, and we're around 50 employees at this point in time. So we're working on keeping that team moving and keeping their customers happy and our customer base growing. Our wireless coverage looks like this. So on the far side is Sharbot Lake. On the left side is Sharbot Lake, and Sharbot Lake is north of Kingston. And it goes all the way, our coverage goes all the way over to the Quebec border. So at the Quebec border, we have the tower at North Lancaster, which is in gray here. The gray is because we recently rolled out a new coverage in that area for 100 down and 20 up. So customers that need the 100 down and the 20 up, they can get that now. And we're gradually going to take all the orange and dark purple, I think it's called, slots. We're going to take those and try to upgrade them towards that, depending on the demand in that particular area. So you can see that we have a pretty big footprint in Eastern Ontario, and that's without actually adding in the DSL and the fiber customers and the cable customers. So all of those are part of the way we deliver our network. So we do a lot of service for the community. So we provide support for events. Those events vary widely, and we also do help municipalities out. So in Ottawa, we do some things with some of their meeting spaces where we provide the Wi-Fi, so that the city doesn't have to manage it themselves. We do it for them, and we're also working on the light rail transit construction, where we're probably in 8 or 10 of the construction trailers, helping get the delivery done properly. So that's all part of the plan for how to get that done. We also there's a lot of business in the rural areas. So it starts with smart farms. We've done over 150 smart farms. There's also marinas and campgrounds, which are part of the tourism group, and we deliver there. And we also have some manufacturers that wanted to be in the countryside for lower costs, and we do deliver that way. And we handle some things for distribution and logistics, as well as tourism. So those are all kinds of industries that we're in. So let's talk about improving your resilience. These are some of the pictures we have from the areas where people are doing networks. You'll see there's stuff in the field, and of course Ontario has a lot of trees. So we're able to deliver across those. So you have to think about what kind of disasters your organization's been through. Here in Ontario last year, we went through a derecho, which is like a horizontal hurricane that went straight through an area. We survived an ice storm. There were some floods. There was occasionally snowstorms, and lots of times there's thunderstorms. So, as climate change continues, we totally expect that the number of events that will happen across a year will increase. And so that's important to us, to make sure that we're actually thinking about resilience. In fact, Chris Ranklers, who's on this call, was involved in doing a survey across all of our towers to discover how long the batteries might last if they were struck by a power outage. And furthermore, what kind of generator did they have? How long would that generator run for? And was it propane, or what was it gas? So that we could understand how long that would run before we actually had to run out a jerry can of gas or whatever to them. So all of those things, generate hydro outages, and that's really the biggest outage that we get. And often they're less than 5 minutes. But when they do last a longer period of time, that's when you need to think about how can you make your access to internet more resilient. So even the pandemic caused you to think about resilience. So how did you move your workers to be able to work from home? What did you do to accommodate that for them? Did you have to change your actual access into the building, because most of the time there was maybe 50 people in the building, and now all of a sudden there's 5 people in the building and 45 of them at their home? So how did that change your network planning? And also, things can happen that are not weather related. So for instance, in Mississauga, once upon a time, long ago, there was a railway disaster. And because of the chemical spill, nobody was allowed into the area for quite some time. So what happens to your business if you're not allowed to go to your office for 3 days? Boy, you wish that you brought that stuff home every night, I bet. So the real question for you is, do you have a checklist by disaster type? Have you thought about this? Have you managed to put together an overall disaster recovery plan for both IT and operations? And in IT, I include your networking. And the one thing I learned when we went through the ice storm way back when in 1989 was, how do you declare the disaster? Who actually declares it? And some of this is important because when you declare the disaster, that's when the insurance company stuff kicks in if you have insurance. So we'll talk about that in a bit. But it's important for you to think about who in the company gets to declare the disaster. Is it a group of senior managers? Is it an individual? And how does that get communicated? Because you've got to think about it. If you're trying to tell your staff not to come in because there's been a flood or there's a railway disaster in your immediate area and you're not allowed to get into the area, how do you get that? Is there a calling tree? Do you know how to get hold of all your staff? Do you have their current numbers? Do you have their current cell numbers? All those kinds of questions become part of the kind of things that you need to ask about. And then furthermore, you're going to have customers call you. What can you possibly do? So during the ice storm, I was running MB Foster, and we actually forwarded our phones from Chesterville to our office is in Toronto and also in Seattle, so that we could actually have coverage from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. Like we normally would have, but we were without power for a short period of time before we actually got a generator in to run the whole thing. There's a lot of customers who might want to talk to you about various things, and your salespeople and support people may have ongoing files. So it's important to understand what the communication plan looks like and how will your team have the information they need on hand to be able to talk to those customers. Now that a lot of things are in the cloud, it becomes easier, but that's something to think about. Also, what happens with the public? So if you have public that normally comes to your building and visits you for one reason or another, to have a chat about equipment or their file, how does that work during this disaster? So those are things that you need to actually build a small plan for while you're thinking about it. And so there's a magic little three-letter acronym, which is actually a 5-letter acronym, which is MTTRO. So it stands for Mean Time to Recovery of Operations. And why this is important is because everything relies on how fast can we get this back on the air. If you think about it, all of this has to do with what does it cost to be down for an hour. And that cost is not one number. There may be an ideal time where it doesn't matter if you're down for an hour, like at 2 o'clock in the morning, it may not make any difference. But let's say you ran a restaurant. What happens if it's down from 11:30 to 1:30? What does that mean for you? What is it going to cost your organization? Those kinds of things, people need to actually do the math to figure out what that is. So there's a good time to have a disaster, and there's a bad time to have a disaster. And somewhere in between is the average. And that should be as part of your mean time to recovery of operations calculation, because you're going to, after you know what it costs per hour, at the best case and the worst case, you can actually come up with a figure so you can budget for it. Why is this important? Well, it's important because the activities that you undertake to mitigate the risk becomes really important to make sure that you've got that all sorted out and ready to go. So you have to look at the fact that there's direct and indirect impacts from a disruption. So in your company, it's the customers, it's the operations, it's the staff, and it might even have some safety issues. So you want to think about all those things. If it's what happens with the community, we supply communities with internet, so we know what kind of effect it could have on municipal operations or schools or hospitals, paramedics. What about neighborhoods? What about stores? What about restaurants? So there's all kinds of things that you want to think about. In our case, we have direct and indirect. And then from a regional point of view, the disaster might be regional, and it might have to do with a wildfire. It might have to do with a flood. It could be a windstorm. So all of those things can definitely affect what's going on in the company, and the kinds of things that you need to have thought about mitigating the risks from. Are there any questions at this point? If you wish to put up your hand, there's a little hand down at the bottom, and you just have to click that and you raise your hand. Seeing no hands, we're going to the next slide. So resilience really comes from understanding your mean time to recovery of operation. So understanding your cost per hour for the downtime in your business. So what does it when that happens, and how do you actually make that happen for people? So you just take a look at what does it cost per hour of downtime? What's the maximum and minimum cost? So looking at your time of day, if you're in the middle of your busy season, because you might have a busy season, what happens? So you need to look at time of day, time of month, and time of year to understand what those maximums and minimums are, and how many transactions might be affected, and how many people might be affected, both internal and external. So that's all part of what you're going to look at. And you have to figure out what's the communication plan to make sure that they're looped in and understand what's going on. So that's part of this. And in our case, we also like to track what does an incident cost. So what if this kind of thing happens, how many customers are going to be affected, and what's the number of hours of outage that might be in an area. So that's all part of what should be tracked, because there may be some simple things to help mitigate those risks, and we'll talk about some of those pretty soon. So then the other questions are, do you know your customers? So if you're working with customers and you're not in the internet business, the question is, what's critical to those customers? What does the fact that you've disappeared because you're no longer on the internet because probably a power outage happened, what does that mean to your customers if they're trying to contact you? Do you actually have a UPS for your VoIP machine? So your voice over IP, what happens when the power goes away? So you need to understand that too. So you understand what the customer journey is going to be. So when we look at customers, we always look at what is it that they learn, what is it that they do in conjunction with you on different workflows. And so taking a look at how does this affect those customers, and what can you do to help better support them. So those are things to think about. The other another item on the list is to understand how your work from home staff is prepared for resilience. So do they have a UPS or some way of getting power if the grid goes away? How do they get their internet? And then, because you care about your staff, do they actually have 72 hours of food and water put aside to make sure that they can survive the flood, the derecho, the tornado, or the ice storm after effects? So those are important questions to think about. And I know some businesses that have put together checklists for their staff to make sure that the staff is thinking about, gee, if we got stuck at home because there's a 20-inch snowstorm coming by, what is it that we need to actually be doing to be able to survive that event. So those are the kinds of things that we get people to think about. So if you're looking at your resilience, you need to be thinking, first of all, power is the biggest thing in for why we get internet outages at storm. And it's because we have those 250 plus tower locations. So, and in the rural areas, there's these thing called trees, and occasionally a branch falls on a wire and takes out power in that area till somebody comes to fix it. The good news is that both Hydro One and Ottawa Hydro are very capable of providing a map that shows you where the power outage is, whether it's being diagnosed, and how long it's going to take before it gets back on the air, and how many customers are affected. So those are all things that are useful, and they're pretty quick at getting that kind of stuff up. We found out from the folks at Ottawa Hydro that they actually lose 300 to 400 poles a year. Car accidents, a plow hits them, they have to take it out of service because it needs to be replaced because it's been there too long, so end of life. So all those things can really affect what's going on in the power world. And so you need to understand that your area may get affected because some car or truck rammed into a pole and you no longer have power. So it may not be a weather generated item at all. So if you're looking at power, the short version is a UPS, basically a battery. It may have power filtering as well, which might be good because a lot of times we get brownouts. When somebody's having problems with power, it might be because a tree keeps hitting the wires and taking some of the electricity away from that wire, which means that you get less than perfect voltage, which means that a UPS, which actually feeds your devices, will actually correct for that power shortage. And so that can be a useful thing as well. So it's basically a battery with some control stuff, and they range in price. The one thing I will tell you is that on your critical item list for critical things you need to support, it's not just your desktop and your displays. You really want to think about where's your router. If you might have to have two UPSs, one for your office, and then if you've stuck your router in the basement or in the attic, you actually should have a UPS to cover that separately to make sure that it has a battery backup to keep running, even though the actual power to the building's gone. And if you're doing a desk, you probably want to include a light so that you can actually see what's on your desk if it's after dark. So you get your screens, you get your CPUs, and you get your and you get your light. Generally speaking, don't support your printer because you probably don't need to print in the dark. If you do need, you can turn on the printer, but it will suck power faster than most other devices because they basically want to stay at a certain temperature. And so if they're laser printers anyway, and therefore, because of that, they will take a lot of power just sitting there idle. So it's better that you don't have them connected and you turn them on as required if you really need that. So then you get to do your wish list. How long do I actually want to be able to support us being out of power? So is it going to be something where it covers an hour, or do you want it to go for 4 hours, or do you need it to go for 12 hours? So all those questions are part of sizing your UPS, and we're looking at how to help customers size those UPSs because we have a good line on where to get them. It's just a matter of what size do you actually need for your quote operation unquote, which might be at your work from home office, or it might be your restaurant, or it might be your warehouse. Any one of those things, there's different plans for that. And of course, if it's going to be too long a time and you need to be up all the time, perhaps having a generator to feed the critical areas is good. So in storm, we have a generator. It'll last for about 23 hours at the main building, and has been used in the last year, when they went and replaced a telephone pole, or sorry, a hydro pole. And so the fact that we have enough fuel to keep it going for 23 hours, and it's an auto start, and it has a huge battery to hold the identified circuits. So we don't hold the whole building. We actually said these are the critical items that we need to support in the business at the time of a power failure. So all of that's part of the what goes on. We also have to have you think about how long does the support work. So if you want 12 hours, you're probably at the point where you also need a generator. So you can, if you do your MTTRO calculation, you can cost out what the downtime is going to be. You can take a look at what will it cost you, and you can use that as if you as a benchmark for how much would you actually like to do in terms of being able to get the all the things going properly. So you do need to think about that downtime, what it's costing you, and what you're willing to put up against it. That's why we have a thing called business interruption insurance. That means if something goes to hell in a handbasket, as they would like to say, what is it that you have to do to declare an emergency, and what will the business interruption insurance cover for you? And so your business will be different than our business, but you might want to take a look and see what kind of insurance you do have, and especially if you build a DRBC plans or a disaster recovery business continuity plan, it often gets you a reduction in insurance because they never have to pay out on that if you've done it properly, because you've already figured out how to mitigate those risks. So talk with your insurance company about that. Often you get a reduction in your insurance cost because you have that plan. You have to keep that plan updated. There's a bunch of work that needs to be done. So you identify a lot of different things, how many people are affected by this application versus that application. That's important because that will affect your recovery plan, which is the second stage. So the first one is, here's the disaster, who's affected, how do we communicate with people? The second stage is, what is the recovery plan? What order do we recover the applications in? So you might have 20 to 40 applications running your business. What's the order in which you bring things back up? And how will you know when you're back to normal so you can declare the end of the disaster? That's important as well, because the opening stopwatch or time and the closing time, it will be something that the insurance company will ask you. And things that are affected by that, you need to know what they were. So you got that. And don't forget about keeping your security running through this entire process. It's all part of making sure that you have resilience. Anybody have any questions on the MTTRO or the resilience side? Hello, audience. Okay, I'll move on. So one of the questions is, have you ever done a drill? Have you ever pretended that you had a power outage and you had to actually recover from it, but it's going to be gone for 4 hours? Have you ever actually written down what would be affected? Did you do it as a simulation, or did you have to do it for real because it actually happened? And then you can make notes. So you prefer it didn't happen, but you can take a look at it and you can do drills to see, how do you get things going? We had a customer of my software company where we looked at a disaster recovery with them because they had to license some of our software for they were in the New York area, and their recovery center was in Colorado. And after they'd done quarterly for a year and a half drills against disaster recovery, what they did was everybody went to the airport to fly to Colorado to bring up the other center. Some people were trying to work it remotely, but they were going in, and they decided they wouldn't take the guy who did the networks. They decided that deliberately to see whether he'd actually documented his role absolutely, positively, perfectly, because somebody else, a second in command, had to take it over and make it happen. So one of the things is, what happens if Fred is on vacation in the Dominican Republic at the week you decide to have a disaster, or God decides to give you a disaster? So you want to think about, how does this work for you? What would it look like? Is it all documented well enough that somebody else could step in and help with the business continuity side? So those are things you want to think about. It's not just about thinking about how do I recover. It's about making sure that you have it documented well enough that others with a similar skill set can actually help augment that recovery team if somebody from the team is not there for any one of a number of reasons. And you have your IT recovery, which IT always says is obvious, but you also get an opportunity to take a look at operations recovery. So how do you get it back to normal for your customers? How do you get it back to normal for your staff? So those are things that there are going to be steps that you take to bring things back online. People who are in your team need to know what order you're going to bring back the applications, and how long roughly it's going to take to get back there. And the communication plan, we still have customers that are using calling trees, and those calling trees allow them to actually go ahead and get hold of people, because what will happen is each person in a calling tree will have maybe 5 or 6 people that they need to call, and there's an order, and then you can bring things to people's attention, which is why you also need to keep your phone list current, and also email lists. And because nowadays, of course, there's various ways that people connect with other people, including Messenger from Facebook and things like that. So all of those things are part of the puzzle. And when you think about it, it's all about business recovery and continuity and getting back in operation as fast as you can. So what has your team done to document what you do? And secondly, what has your team done to actually practice that, so you can take a look at it? And is it documented well enough that if you dropped a new person in, they could actually take it over? So those are the kinds of things that we're actually looking at on those. Any questions on that? Okay. Storm can help with your internet resilience. We can do things as simple as providing you with a second connection to your building, which might be wireless instead of the fiber we bring to your building, or it might be DSL as a failover from either your fiber or your wireless. But it's a matter of, how do we make sure you have enough internet to make this work in case somebody does take a backhoe to a fiber in the neighborhood. So those are the kinds of things that we can do, along with, of course, having a discussion about people who are working from home and how we can support them, having a discussion about sizing UPS, have a discussion about the various aspects of your business, so that you can actually build a disaster recovery plan. We certainly could help provide a checklist for things you might want to consider for your disaster recovery and business continuity side of the world. So those are the kinds of things that we could actually help with, so people can get that. And we have a hand up from Stan Walker. Stan, if you unmute yourself, we can have a chat.
Hi, Burkett. Yeah, thanks very much. Really interesting so far. I guess I've been sort of waiting to ask this question, and I think it's the right time. Obviously, for a lot of companies, redundancies, very common these days, 2 or 3 connections. I'm just interested to hear what Storm's definition of diversity and versus true diversity really is, because I think it's sometimes misunderstood out in the marketplace.
Yeah, so there's a number of different things that we're looking at. So one of our initiatives is the one that Chris Ranklers has been running, which is to look at the towers and how long the towers will last with the battery and generator that they have, so we can understand that and what kind of equipment's involved and so on and so forth. So each of the towers has been inventoried, and we are working through a plan to improve our resilience everywhere. But the other thing is customers don't always understand that a lot of the things that people run into are weather related and not in our control. For those things, we're looking at doing the best job we can to be resilient. In fact, we're tracking a group in the US, which is actually offering certifications in resilience, for storm resilience. And they're doing it with a variety of techniques. We have to look to see whether it would make sense. And as we move into the next stage, which is we're going to provide 24/7 support for our commercial customers, we've just got the plans in place to do that this year. And so as we move into that kind of thing, we will take a look to see how many customers would like us to go the next stage, which is to look at deliberately making redundancy happen in various areas that make sense, and to deliberately try to support them as we can. So that's all part of the kind of things we're looking at, Stan. Did that fully answer your question?
Yeah, I think so, Birgit. Yeah, I guess ideally for a larger organization, that has a budget to do it, they might look at, say, a primary fiber connection, and then a redundant true diversity fixed wireless solution that would obviously go to different hub sites, wouldn't have anything to do with maybe Bell fiber backhaul, and then really to take it one step further, maybe connect to a different data center, in that city versus Bell. So that, to me, that is the true diversity solution that not all companies are looking for, but I think it is important to some.
And it will be, and it totally depends on your actual costs on the mean time to recovery of operation. If you come up with a cost that's very high, then you're willing to spend a little more money to mitigate that risk. And in some places it's about the power, and people are looking to be on two sections of the grid rather than being on one. So so that's an easy way of getting your backup done properly, assuming you have failover for your power. We also do have customers that have moved their on-premises servers into our colo rooms, because our colo room has multiple fibers coming in from different companies, and in addition, it does have the backup power, which starts with the UPS and then defaults over to the generator, and in the building. And so there are people doing that too, because they can't themselves justify a 23-hour generator, and so they would rather lease power and space from us in our colo room. So that's one of the ways around some of that. So it's not even on their premises anymore. Those are among the things. I think that eventually, companies are going to actually have to talk to their insurance company about the kind of resilience they have, depending on the climate disaster that might strike. So they're going to have that conversation. Insurance companies are much better about checklists on these things at this point than they were 5 years ago. And I totally expect, we've done a DRBC plan. We had some outside help to help us with that. There's a couple of companies around that do that. Your accounting company may do it, but there's actually a disaster recovery specialty company that all they do is stick it in the cloud for you. So it's there, but they make you answer all the questions, which means that you actually do have a really good framework for how that disaster recovery works. Most of their customers are in the US. It's funny, they come from here, Ottawa area. Anything else, Stan, on that?
Yeah, no, that's great, Birgit. Yeah, just confirming that was sort of the the route you guys were taking. It sounds like you are, so perfect.
Yeah. Also, the other thing is on backup internet. We have some new technology that we deployed about 6 weeks ago, and it allows point-to-point and point-to-multipoint without having to have a license technology, and it'll push more than a gig. So, and right now we've tested it at 4.3, and we know about how the rain fade works because the primary is 60 gigahertz. So that means it's really, really fast, and it means a raindrop will actually interfere. But this is new options. So now people could have their fiber backup being wireless and truly get a full gig to their premises. So for most small and medium businesses, they don't need more than a gig ever. So that's something to consider as well. We have new plans that our sales team can put in place to help people out with that. And we'll look at what your situation is and help you right size the backup and recovery side of that. So that's point-to-point and point-to-multipoint wireless. And also, of course, multi-carriers, like you said, and multi-internet paths is where we go. Well, we're now at the official question and answer section of the slides. So maybe now you have some more questions. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you for the information, Burkett. More of a comment, if that's okay. Something that, because of our field, kind of comes to mind is maybe also having prepared communications for your external constituencies, letting them know that you're working these particular plans. And in the case of a really desperate situation, maybe even having a whole type of dark site that you might reveal for your website. And I've heard of that for really extreme situations, but unfortunately, extreme situations happen, and they might be something that would be worth including in any preparedness package would be your comms as well for things that you could reasonably anticipate, although God forbid, you'd never want to happen. But at least you're not scrambling to write copy at those times.
That's absolutely true. We actually, Anne might want to copy a comment on this, but we actually, when we discover a node that is down that might cause a large number of calls, we actually change the message on the phones to allow people to know that we're aware of it and we're working on it. And we often put things up on social media to let customers know that there's something going on. Anne, any comments on that or?
No, you're absolutely right. We do pinpoint the areas that it's affected, and we do put it on our social media as well as on our phone system as well. So customers can call in, hear it right away, so they don't have to wait.
Right. So we do get that kind of thing sorted out, but you're right. You need a comms plan. Now, we've never done formal written comms for larger situations, but individual towers here and there going out, we absolutely have a plan for how you implement that. Substitute the name of the tower for this block, and everything else is the same, and it's a recorded message and says we're aware of it at XYZ tower. Okay. Did that answer your question, Mark? It was a good comment, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, very good.
Yeah, so yeah, disaster recovery plan needs to include a comms plan. And the comms plan isn't just, as I mentioned way back up, the comms plan is not just your staff. The comms plan is the customer. The comms plan should include your suppliers. Because what happens if you had a supplier coming today to install something? Like, not happening, but or this is how it'll happen. But you should be thinking about who's scheduled to come for a meeting in the building, and assuming that you're still using buildings. So those are among the many things. In fact, one of the disadvantages of having people all working from home is you need to have much more equipment to be able to support them than you would if they were all in the same building, where you can get some economies of scale by having the right firewalls, the right switches, all that kind of stuff in supporting, let's say, 50 people rather than supporting, each individual has to have their own thing. So that's part of that. We're looking at how to better support work from home people. I expect that we'll have some solutions in that area in the next 6 months as part of our outreach to customers around disaster recovery and business continuity and resilience. Any more questions? Well, we try to make this thing last 45 minutes and then Q&A, but seeing as how there's no Q&A, I just want to thank you all for all your help and suggestions on our webinar series. That's for starters. We are working our way through them. The next webinar up is actually one on fixed wireless access, and we have some things to talk about on that. The one after that, well, we include one on the knock, so I'm sure that Anne's well down the road on getting that ready, so we can talk to the way that we actually support people from a commercial standpoint, especially since one of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to provide this 24/7 support. It'll be a premium support. There'll be different levels, and we'll be rolling that package out over the next 6 or 8 weeks to help people understand how we can support them better. It's all part of helping you become more resilient in 2024. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to all of you. We hope that that you'll tell a friend about how we do support you in being a customer, and perhaps encourage them to at least look at us as an option when they're planning to pick things for internet and communications. Done a lot of work lately on things like Wi-Fi. You'll be seeing us do a program on Wi-Fi this year, where we're looking at helping you upgrade from your Wi-Fi 4 and 5, which are basically at end of life right now, and moving up to newer versions of Wi-Fi. Not necessarily 7, because 7's a little early. It's not even the standard yet, but there are people putting out Wi-Fi 7 devices despite that. But we think that there's some really good reasons for moving up to say Wi-Fi 6 or 6E. So we think that'll be part of it. So we're going to take the Wi-Fi series and update it a bit, and put that Wi-Fi webinar and update it a bit, and put it out there as a repeat webinar for us. And we've been asked if we would bring the SEO back, because a bunch of people missed it because it was just at the end of November there. So we'd like to help people get where they need to get to on understanding about SEO. And we're excited to see you on the 25th about fixed wireless access, and you'll learn some stuff about how that could be failover or could be primary, and especially if you're in rural areas. Anyway, that's the kind of thing we're working on. We appreciate everything that you feed us back. So any comments, feel absolutely free to get a hold of us. And we're very happy to take your suggestions on both topics, and if we can do something better, please let us know about that. And there we are. That's our webinar for today. I thank you all for dropping in, and if there's anything we can do to help, let me know.
Thanks, Birgit.
You're most welcome.